Sunday Live.
It's right. We're going to go straight to our feature story tonight. And for the second time in as many weeks, Citizen Television has established that defiant Kenyans, some assisted by corrupt practices among the police, continue to flout the curfew and cessation of movement restrictions imposed by the government to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Our investigations have found out that some Kenyans are still traveling to their rural homes and back to Nairobi, despite existing restriction of movement orders into and out of the capital. Our undercover team saw how corrupt police officers are receiving as little as 50 shillings to facilitate passage of those flouting the restrictions. Now, Citizen Television's undercover crew drove past roadblocks and what we call panya routes in the bushes, and were able to film police officers receiving bribes and allowing Kenyans to break the coronavirus guidelines. Here now is our second edition of Virus Safaris with our very own investigative reporter, Purity Mambwa.
The amount payable is negotiable. Cessation of movement orders have become good business. The government is counting on them to enforce the movement restriction put across the country. The questioning sounds very tough, but it just happens to be an account opening statement. 14 days ago, we went undercover, observing the drivers that were breaking the cessation of movement rules. With apparent ease, they moved travelers in and out of Nairobi. This is Virus Safaris, Part 2. Come with us as we take you to Machakos and Kimende towns. Protecting Kenya's rural population, particularly the elderly that live there, was the government's main motivation in imposing movement restrictions in and out of Nairobi, a city that is the country's COVID-19 epicenter. This unseen enemy here has infected thousands in Kenya. The most vulnerable are the terminally ill and the elderly. These are the people we have to work hard to protect and save their lives. We went undercover in one of the biggest bus parks in Nairobi, Machakos Country Bus. This bus park was always buzzing with thousands of travelers to different parts of the country, but right now it looks empty. It is not because people are not traveling, but they have figured a way out on how to beat the ban. We will show you how. One of our crew members posed as a passenger. He booked a vehicle that would take him to Machakos County. Inside this vehicle were two other passengers. One of them was headed to Kitui, and the other, Makueni County. The journey started well. The driver would even boast of how he has been ferrying passengers in and out of Nairobi. While our colleague was filming inside the vehicle, we trailed them. He was a fast driver. Sometimes we would even lose track of him. He confessed of how he's been driving past the roadblocks. And as they were approaching the barrier, guarded by the General Service Unit, he assured them that all would be well. Finally, they arrived at the roadblock. And this is how the conversation went on.
I'm all right, sir. Naenda Kitui, sir. Jana nilipitia hapa. I was supposed to kulikuwa turudi jana, lakini the problem ika happen kwa gari yangu. Sasa nilikuwa nikitengeneza nikaweka brake pads.
We watched from a distance as he produced a letter. And with confidence, the driver and his passengers alighted to have their temperatures checked. And after they were clear to proceed with their journey, our undercover journalist asked him to explain how he was able to convince the officer.
Unajua hii barua imeandikwa majina ya watu. Sasa venye nimemwelezea ni general. We came yesterday. Na tulikuwa turudi jana. Shida gari ikaharibika. That's why we are going back.
So ni majina za watu wengine hao?
Ni majina za watu wengine ndio wameangalia.
The government has not put in place any systems to verify such letters. The cop had no way of proving it was fake. We caught up with our colleague in Machakos town. The driver and his other passengers proceeded with their journey. We drove back to Machakos Junction. We had been informed of a different route that people have been using to evade the roadblock. We were advised to use a boda. The whole journey would take us an hour from Makutano Junction to Athi River town. The journey would cost 1,000 shillings per every passenger. We took the ride. The road was bumpy and dusty. Many other passengers were too using the same route. We had been told that we would encounter at least 3 groups of police officers. As we approached the first group of 3 police officers, the boda rider asked our crew to pay part of the fare. The policeman was dressed in civilian. With a blink of an eye, he received the money. The journey continued. We encountered the other police officers. At some point, the rider wanted to turn back, but they asked him not to. This is after receiving the bribe. It is a norm in this route. Close to 100 bodas pass here. Some make between 2 to 3 trips per day. And every journey, they pay each group of police officers 100 shillings. After an hour, we caught up with our colleagues in Athi River. When we aired Virus Safaris Part 1, at least 64 motorists were arrested and 4 police officers at the Blue Post roadblock in Thika town.
Nimekwambia nilikuwa natoka Nairobi nikielekea na Rumoru kuendea Misiri.
Nilikuwa natoka Kahawa nikiingia Thika nikakosea barabara nikapita hizi. Nikakosea tu kidogo. Sasa nikitoa barua noti ya 200 ikaanguka. Akalalia nampatia. Sasa akalalia. Unaona ni corruption. Hapana mimi sikuwa napatia nipenda ianguka tu kipati baya. Nipenda ianguka tu kipati baya.
They had attempted to bribe their way past the barrier. 30 GSU officers too were removed from the roadblock. In the story, we boarded a small private vehicle and drove towards Maimahiu town. Sometimes, the driver would advise us to alight from the vehicle and walk past the police roadblocks. Or use bodas. We managed to get to Eldoret town after boarding at least 4 matatus. We went back again, but this time we decided to drive past the general service barrier placed in Limuru town. Our crew boarded yet another private vehicle and we filmed undercover. As the driver approached Kangemi town, he was stopped by the traffic police officers.
Sawa mkubwa. Nini gani hiyo unapesa? Uko salama? Sasa ulete mingi, ulete kidogo. Nyamaza wewe. Nakushika siku moja wewe.
They let him go after parting with 50 Kenyan shillings. The Nairobi Metropolitan Barrier, placed in Ilimuru along Nairobi-Nakuru Highway, is meant to stop passengers arriving or leaving Nairobi and prevent those coming from western part of Kenya, Rift Valley, Nyanza, among other areas to access Nairobi. Our cameraman filmed secretly as the driver put 200 Kenyan shillings in an envelope. Finally, they arrive at the roadblock. The GSU officer asks the driver to identify himself.
Yes, afande.
Nzuri.
Poa sana bwana.
Yes, sema nisikie.
Niko nataka kwenda hapa soko mjinga.
Tena.
Okay. Hii ndio baro.
Fungua.
He handed the envelope to the GSU officer.
Hii ni license. Angalia. Tunarudi tu saa hii.
Ati?
Tunarudi tu saa hii.
Fanya nini? Unarudi kufanya nini?
Tunataka kuchukua tumboga hapo tuuze Nairobi bwana. Sawa.
And they were allowed to proceed with their journey. But we discovered yet another route that goes past Lari police station and takes you to Kimende town. We drove through it. We encountered a police roadblock. We were asked to identify ourselves. We did. That almost ruined our story. But we knew another group of police officers were ahead. Instead of proceeding in a vehicle, we decided to use a border. As soon as our crew arrived at the roadblock, the police officers started the interrogation.
Yes, bro.
Salama sana.
Harijambo.
Mzuri sana.
Umetoka pande gani?
Kwenda sokoni.
Sokoni gani?
Pale Kimende.
Umetoka pande gani?
Tukitoka pale tu. Kwa
Ngoja bwana, ngoja. Niongea na customer. Huyu ni kwa kitambulisho yangu.
sokoni na kutumisha ile.
At some point, they suspected that they were being recorded. They took our phone, but they were not able to locate the cameras. Their colleagues had tipped them of our presence in the area. The rider gave them 50 shillings. We proceeded to Kimende town, meaning we could be able to proceed with our journey to Eldoret again. After 60 days of lockdown in Kenya, tens of thousands of citizens obeyed the quarantine rules. Thousands disobeyed. But the very people who were meant to protect the obedient Kenyans have turned desperate Kenyans into cash cow. Millions are now waiting to hear what the president will say on the fight that Kenya appears to be losing. And that's Virus Safaris. Purity Mwambia, Citizen TV.